of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, where we dive deep into the media industry headlines and dissect the digital disruption that diverges the masses into the new media counterculture and away from the media establishment. Here is the king of podcasts. We're going to start things off with OnlyFans because it just broke as I record episode 188 of the Broadcasters Podcast. We're going to get right into it. So they're going to start banning pornography starting in October. And it's a big deal. It's something that I've talked about on the When I'm Not Podcasting series many times, where OnlyFans, which has been a point of contention for many of those out there when it comes to content. And being able to do content is risque or, personal. But OnlyFans has gone through some things, and this is a pretty big deal for those that are in content creation, that are broadcasting themselves in this platform, which is kind of a social media platform of its own, a premium social media platform, which is where content creators can make money. They can profit, they can monetize from what they're doing on here. And that's what's going on. So there's a number of stories that have been brought on as a result of what happened to OnlyFans. I think this is an important story, and it fits in line with the show. So why not talk about it? So here's what we got so far. Todd Spangler, going to take from Variety.com. OnlyFans, which has amassed a base of more than 130 million users, largely for adult-oriented subscription fan pages, announced that it will ban sexually explicit content this fall. Effective October 1st, 2021, OnlyFans will prohibit the posting of any content containing sexually explicit content. In order to ensure the long-term sustainability of the platform and to continue to host an inclusive community of creators and fans, we must evolve our content guidelines. And as I said back on the other show, I said to myself, well, you knew there was going to be a point where this was going to be too much because OnlyFans made so much money. But the initial investment that got brought in, the cash flow, the windfall of money coming in, and the percentage that we're taking from the content creators in order to build up OnlyFans, which is a very strong platform and very obviously has worked well, has not crashed as much, has been working well. It happens. So what happened now, creators will continue to be allowed to post content containing nudity as long as it's consistent with our acceptable use policy. The terms currently allow nudity, except in the case of content featuring public nudity recorded in or broadcast from a jurisdiction where public nudity is illegal. And all creators are verified prior to being able to upload any content to OnlyFans, and all uploaded content is checked by automated systems and human traffickers. OnlyFans earlier this week launched OFTV, a free streaming service that will not include any sexually explicit material. OFTV features original content for more than 100 OnlyFans creators, spanning fitness, cooking, comedy, health, music, and more. And they soft launched their on-demand streaming service, much like a Netflix, much like a Disney Plus, with content library of over 800 videos. Since 2016, OnlyFans has paid out more than $5 billion to creators worldwide. It was a hub to make money. Hey, for people to judge the fact that if there might have been sex workers that might have been on here originally, and the fact they got kicked off because amateurs came on board, started jacking up their rates even higher, and then celebrities came on and just, they butchered the system. That's what happened. The pandemic escalated it. That only benefited OnlyFans, but now they're going to go and cash in on the debauchery, and they're going to cash out in the debauchery event, and now they're going to cash in on something much more investment worthy and much more friendly to investment dollars. That's what they're going to do. According to its terms, the company keeps 20% of revenue generated by its 2 million plus creators. Because it has been a home to X-rated content, OnlyFans is only available on the web and not on mobile app platforms. Top personalities with OnlyFans fan pages have included Bad Baby, Cardi B, Jordan Woods, Bella Thorne, Tyga, Amber Rose, Black China, Ruby Rose, Tana Mongeau, and Trey Songz. July 2021 alone, OnlyFans approved 114,065 creator accounts. and only deactivated 15 accounts last month after detecting child pornography on those accounts. So the other part that's happening now that has caused the stir, we already knew that the explicit content was going to get curbed down. Like, that was the plan anyway. But then the other thing that has been said about was a BBC investigation where they discovered a compliance manual suggesting OnlyFans intentionally tolerated illegal content. Let's take the investigation as what they've done. It says that they were talking about how the video sharing site was knowingly letting creators slide despite publishing illegal content on the internet. Instead of banning an account or sounding the alarm, this is from TheVerge.com, the company explicitly recommends in a compliance manual that moderators should first issue a series of 3 warnings about why each piece of content has been removed, unless it's as a successful creator, in which case accounts of those with higher numbers of subscribers can be given additional warnings when rules are broken. And the site's most creative, successful creators are handled by a different team. Then they also said they scoured the site for illegal content, watched videos about exploiting homeless people, spoke to some of OnlyFans moderators itself, quoted a U.S. Homeland Security agent about how many child abuse images originated there. Probably the same kind of content that might have come from Pornhub, which is why Pornhub got neutered and all the amateur content got pulled away. Now you only have professional content up there. That's not good. Now, OnlyFans, to kind of offset the negative news about pulling the porn content, whether good or not, whether you like it or not, and this story from the BBC investigation, they rushed out a transparency report claiming, quote, "We invest heavily in fighting child sexual exploitation online," pairs that claim with incredibly few details. They contributed one particular case to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and deactivated 15 accounts. That's where we are. OnlyFans takes the hit. Now, who takes that place? Because there's always going to be room for adult content. We don't talk about it much on here. But, I mean, you know, I look at it myself because I did at some point work in content back in 2006 solely for the adult industry. Oh, it's a 2007. Long story short, I actually worked for a station that was with ynot.com, ynot.com, which is one of the major adult content aggregators, if you will. And they actually hosted their own radio network. And I got to program the programming there. And then the next year, I got to go and produce a podcast for Adult Friend Finder. And that was fun, you know, working on all that kind of stuff. Getting to meet all the major porn stars. I met them all. I met Jenna Jameson, Tara Patrick, and Ron Jeremy, and lots of others at various events. And then transitioned to doing more mainstream content because we just got away from it. But we always get into something where my company, we can go into something a little more niche or a little more fringe, which is why I'm working in cannabis now, doing programming for that industry, which I enjoy. So far, it's been fine. Now, that's what's going on there with OnlyFans. And that's a story we're going to continue to follow along with and see what happens from there. Now, the next thing I want to bring up, this really just got me because there's a boatload of content that I pulled up, and I don't know if I'm going to get through all of it tonight, but I'll try. Just give you a little update of what I want to talk about, and we'll see what we can get to. Are NFTs the new Napster? The state of the Billboard Hot 100's top 10 in the first half of 2021. Protecting the future of journalism with a Journalist Protection Act. Let's see. I also have, are we finally moving closer to a one-stop streaming shop for broadcast radio? We're going to talk about the issues with the Hollywood celebrities not making the money on streaming when their movies are being simultaneously published, not just to exhibition, but also to streaming services like Disney+. We're going to talk about that. So the Scarlett Johansson legal battle. And then more of that when it comes to what Disney+ is doing. And then we also look at the movie star salaries of the biggest stars, just to give you an idea of what people are making these days. Let's see if I can get through all of it. The next thing is in podcasting. I had to bring this up because I just thought, okay, somebody decided to go and make some point. And the last time I got pissed off at somebody talking about podcasting was Bob Pittman saying that podcasting is radio's birthright. And I don't know if I talked about it on this show, but I have brought it up, and it did piss me off. Well, somebody decided to do an op-ed on podcasting, so I had to go and jump in. Let's read through it. Let me give proper context. This is Omri Armageddon. Omri Armageddon. Now, this is through adage.com. Of course, all the links to all this you can find right now on the website, broadcasterspodcast.com, or where you find the show in the show description. I leave those links there for all of you. The question he asks in this opinion editorial column, why podcasting won't be anything more than a niche ad vertical. Read that. That sounds like a hit piece to me, but I'm going to read through it and see what he says. IAB, the Interactive Advertising Bureau, Chris Brudell, that's what it sounds like, okay, wrote that better ad tools, holistic third-party measurement, and improved listener experiences will significantly increase podcast advertising. I agree with his thesis, he says, but don't believe podcasting will be anything more than a niche ad vertical. Despite millions invested in podcasting from companies including Amazon, Apple, iHeartMedia, Spotify, and more, the early numbers and growth rates show that most consumers are passing on podcasts. Here's why, he says. First, most people can't podcast and multitask. If people could work and listen to podcasts simultaneously as they do with music, podcasting would have a better chance. Sure, you can listen to podcasts while folding laundry, ironing, cooking, and commuting, but we're all doing less of that as we work mostly from home. I disagree. I actually work out in the pool, and I'm listening to podcasts, matter of fact. And in the car, we're still going to drive out to the supermarket, to the drugstore, go other places. Like, working mostly from home, that's a different story. But we're out doing things, maybe working out, maybe other things we're doing. If we're walking, we could be listening to a podcast. Why not? And the other thing, too, is that a lot of podcasts, if you're going to listen to them, they're weekly formatted. You got weekly shows. Not every show is doing every day or every other day. For some people, you're driving the car. There's a lot of people that are still listening to it that way. And not everybody's going to listen. It just depends on what shows there are. Plus, you got to remember, some podcasts, you're only talking about audio, but a lot of podcasts do video as well. Or they repost their stuff on YouTube like myself. So I don't really take too much to where he says there. Podcasts are designed for a captive audience. No, it's radio. It's just repurposed for a different platform. But you can't do it as radio. But it is radio itself. It's just another way. It's on demand. And there's quite a few things where you can listen to podcasts and, you can find time to go listen to it. Now, let's move along here. Because remember, if people are listening to books or listening to audiobooks are almost the same kind of feel as a podcast. Still audio anyway. He says here, beyond this attention challenge, podcasts are designed for a captive and static audience. It's difficult to skim through a podcast as you can with a newsletter, app, or e-reader, which further limits the ability to engage users via podcast advertising. No. You're talking about something visual. In all those newsletters or e-readers or apps, that's a visual component. YouTube, a visual component. Where you might be surprised how many people are listening in the background to what's being said as opposed to what they're doing in something else. And honestly, you're telling me there's not things you can be doing around the house, like if you're, making breakfast or you're making lunch or, like you said, doing laundry or vacuuming, whatever. And you could have a podcast in the background. You throw a couple of earbuds on and you go. And that's it. But sometimes you don't want to watch TV because you're not going to sit there because streaming video and watching like Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus, that might be a different story because you got to be a little bit consumed into it. You actually got to sit down. I've been watching Dallas, binge watching on IMDb TV. But for me, I can't just watch it every minute because I got to be consumed into the story. But a podcast, it's one that I'm going to catch up on. It's just to catch up on news, hear what I want to hear from it, just like this show. And what about those that are on an airplane? Business travelers that are back on the road once again, or you're going on vacation. All the travelers. There are those right now on the road and they need something to consume their time. And maybe music is getting a little bit tired because some new music might not be out there or old music. They want to listen to it. They want something else as an option. But you're talking about with newsletters, it's a visual. And that's what you're talking about here. It's not needing to be captive or static. You can listen in and just hear it as background noise for all I care. But you could do that. In the 1980s, the radio trade advertising industry ran a brilliant ad campaign highlighting the value of audio as a storytelling medium entitled I Saw It on the Radio. Now, he says podcasting is more news and entertainment. I disagree. Podcasting has kind of a news or information format. It's general interest quite a few times. You have politics, you have health, you have news. It's informative. But there is entertainment on it. You have comedy. You have, talk about movies, talk about things. So you're talking about entertainment. That's entertaining in itself. And you have people that are performers that are doing things. Entertainment could also be, shows like Serial or, Dirty John or things like that. That's entertainment. It's just a different type. I mean, that's what it comes down to. He says now, there's no doubt that entertainment is going through a revolution as video viewing migrates from cable and movie theaters to streaming, the digital disruption, as I always talk about in the show. He's asking, is podcasting part of this entertainment revolution? Yes. It's one of the first things that actually changed because a traditional medium, which is terrestrial radio, was disrupted by something you have to do online, which is on the internet, which is podcasting. I would know, Omri, because I've been doing it since 2005. I've done probably about 15,000 shows in my time, and I'm here to debunk everything you're saying here. It is entertainment. That's what it comes down to. There's a lot of news and information that people get, which they would normally not consume on regular radio because it's for an older audience and it's out of touch. Even though podcast listening includes entertainment news, including gossip and music, it is more of a news distribution channel. What about entertainment of NPR stuff? All Things Considered or, Fresh Air. Like there's some people that might find that entertaining. It might not be your cup of tea, but it could be. Unfortunately, news organizations aren't enjoying the same growth. The New York Times, as a global audience, is performing relatively well. But look at NPR. They're performing extremely well. With most consumer-focused marketers preferring to advertise on entertainment programming, this isn't the ideal for marketing potential of podcasting. No. Because people don't want to be infiltrated with advertising in the first place, just like they want streaming. They want to be able to hear their content without the barrage of commercials. So I get what you're saying right there. If you're talking about advertisers and seeing what podcasting might be, well, that's what you're seeing. We're going to talk about the new relationship with iHeartRadio, with TuneIn and Spreaker, and what they're doing right now to try to get their advertising out to other places. Where podcasts do provide value are as a new and different channel for assisting news organizations to engage with their users in a way that complements a blog, newsletter, or even a print newspaper magazine. No, not just that. That's the corporate end. That's the mainstream end that this ad age writer is saying. But it's not counting the grassroots. Like people like myself that do this. I listen to all the sports podcasters out there, and they're not even... look at the ones that are fans and they're not even entrenched with the league or with the sport they're in. They might have played in a high school or college, but they weren't even part of the team. They're not even internally in the organization or in the locker room. But they talk about it and they record podcasts all the time. That's how it is. Wrestling fans, we're consumed by it. If you like anime, if you like cartoons, if you like cosplay, if you like, whatever. There's a podcast for just about everything out there. And it's a great way to get yourself a voice out there and to be an influencer and to be made out there to be noticed for content you have. Like, the reason the Broadcasters Podcast became a thing that I wanted to do, regardless if it's a micro broadcast that doesn't get a big audience, I understand that. I'm not dumb. I'm not blind. I'm not delusional. I understand there's not a big audience for this, but that's okay. But I enjoy spending a couple of hours to get the show ready, get the graphics ready, read up, and then get ready to go and record this show. And regardless of the content that's going to go out there, hey, it's up to the people that want to listen to it. But I'm filling a void because nobody else is. Bob Garfield does On the Media. And sure, I have done that show. And by the way, it's unfortunate he got fired, by the way. And WNYC fired him over a dispute. I didn't realize all about this, but I missed this story. But that was a show he was doing, and I was like, I did listen to his show and check it out. And I guess he was saying that he was accused of bullying, and he violated the company's anti-bullying policy, so he's out. No, too bad. I actually remember having an interview on Webmaster Radio, as a matter of fact. So, it's nice to get that right there and talk to him. Moving along here. Look at the audiobook market. Well, listen. The audio market itself is great. So, the other thing, too, you got to understand there, Omri, is if the audiobook market is so great, then why does Apple and Audible, as a matter of fact, why did Audible this last year decide to also include podcasts in Audible itself? Like, this program is in Audible. How do you explain that? Now, one thing the advertisers, because this is an Ad Age article, this is an advertising skewed story. But I got to say this. I mean, with the networks I do in my full-time commitments, yes, we're always talking about advertising. We're always trying to go and find ways to bring advertisers on. We don't try to go the normal run-of-the-mill of cost per measurement or cost per click. We don't try to do that. We try to avoid having to put out metrics. We try to go the route that radio has traditionally done, where we are performance-based. We are, we're not worried about we have to go ahead and say, okay, listen, yes, you want to have ROI and you want to try to treat it like it's all analytics. Well, it's not about all analytics. And if you're going to do a nickel and dime about that, then that's what's going to happen. But then the advertisers are going to do the same thing. They're going to wait on analytics. And what needs to happen for advertising in the podcasting space is that they need to worry about how they can actually target the audience. They want to be able to geo-target. They want to be able to dynamically insert, which is what they're doing now. They want to have their way of getting in. So this is why what iHeartRadio does with their platform and what they're doing with their relationships with TuneIn and Spreaker and other places. They're making it happen so they can go ahead and get their advertising out there. So iHeartRadio wants to go ahead and corner the market on getting their advertising out through other channels. Because they're not getting all the traffic going to their site, they're finally relenting and saying, you know what, we need to move this out to other areas. We need to get our programming out to other areas so that our advertising gets out to a wider reach, to platforms with a bigger audience base than us. Because TuneIn is a way bigger platform in terms of subscribers than iHeartRadio is. So why not do that? That's the point. He says that podcasting is growing rapidly from a very small base. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, podcast ad revenue is forecast to be $800 million in 2020, $1.7 billion in 2024. Comparison, radio ad revenue is forecast to be $14.8 billion in 2020. Okay, but then you're also talking about the fact that, and it's supposed to grow to $18.3 billion. But with radio, you're talking about 7,000 radio stations, and these major corporate conglomerates that are all running on this. By the way, how much of that ad revenue for these radio stations is coming from podcasting themselves? Are we kind of segmenting that out, or are we just including it all together in the pot? I'd like to get a little clarification on that. He says, as a marketing guy, I like to get excited by new marketing channels, but before I worry about issues including ad scale measurement, the number of podcast listeners just isn't enough to justify the hype and the valuations. Though audio is having its moment, podcasting is the web 1.0. Okay. And then the argument he puts here is completely, I'm sorry, it's not it. Audio apps, namely Clubhouse, as well as Spaces on Twitter, Yak, Wave, Riffer, and Spoon, are trending as more people get into audio. No, it's a fad. It's a fade. No, it's a fad. It's just it's a flash in the pan. There's a room for Clubhouse and all these audio and the audio rooms that Facebook's doing and all these things. Yeah, it's another place to do audio, but you got a lot of disorganized, unformatted kind of networking conference type formatted stuff. You're doing stuff that would be done at exhibitions. You would watch at conventions. If you're doing it at like that, yeah, that is a pretty good way to do it. If you want to do something that's just an automatic place, you can do a little bit of interaction, sure. But it's not. It's no different than what TikTok has for live or Instagram live or what Periscope was for Twitter. Those are just live channels, and they have, people that are in there that can do things. Text-to-speech apps. Now, he talks about the podcasts that he listens to, which are quite a few that I haven't listened to them myself, but he has quite a few that are pretty good. He says, now, there's nothing wrong with being niche. Some great product categories are brands and niche, including Porsche, DC shoes, and Genius bikes. But to justify high valuations and streaming like Buzz, podcasting is just not there. But what they doesn't understand, Omri, is that if you listen to the ads that are considered in this program, you get Progressive, you get Geico, you get major advertisers on here, or local or regional. And they're all coming on here and putting their own spin on whatever it is. And they're getting their word out there. If it's a new movie, if it's a new project, if it's something that's a timed ad campaign that comes out, and I'm a part of that too, that's fine too. That all works for me. So I get where he's coming from. Part of it. But I think he's misled on the power of podcasting. Of course, I would defend this medium because this is what I do. And I appreciate everybody that's out there. I just want podcasting to be better. I want, if radio is going to go and keep, shitting the bed, then let podcasting be the place that radio continues to thrive. Just because the other radio stations are able to get all the money they can, because there's a lot of money. Like if you think about who does the most spending on advertising of big corporate brands, these big ad rep agencies, Katz Media, and all these big ad agencies that are spending money on the behalf of these corporations to put into radio, not to mention the political ad revenue that comes out every year. There's a lot of that. But we're not talking about that yet either. And who's to say that terrestrial radio is not kind of inflating the numbers of what they're getting in ad revenue? Come on. Think about it. So I appreciate the Ad Age article and the argument he gives. Listen, it's well researched. But I also feel like in the advertising business, podcasting's been getting the short end of the stick anyway for the last decade. Because they just think there's other places to go put advertising. But why they're shutting down and why there's a little bit of a shot on this doesn't make any sense to me. But because of the fact that Omri wants to go make this point, but my deal is, where else are you going to put your advertising? Because for every bit of content you put out there, where are people consuming ads? You're getting them inserted into advertising for radio shows, but to get them in between the shows, in between the content, to get live reads, you're just getting affiliate programs basically to do that. That's the kind of advertising that's been made right now for what's here. But if these ad hosting platforms or these podcast hosts are able to go ahead and insert ads, then yeah, do it. It works best. Like that's where the advertisement can be brought in. But in the middle of the show, for me, in my programming, I do put in ads that are dynamically inserted, and I drop them in twice. because I do want to put some money coming back into the show. And it does do that. And I appreciate all of you that still stick around after the commercials. But I also do the favor of all of you to spread them out pretty good. If I'm doing an hour-long show, I put the first break well after the half-hour mark. So you're at least getting a good half hour without ads. And hopefully you'll want to stick around after that. And then I'll put another ad break right before the end, because I want you to be able to go and listen to another good chunk before we kind of wrap things up. And I hope you will be able to go and listen to it and, handle the fact that it might just be a minute long each time, and you'll stick around to it. And you might not be too upset or perturbed and feel like you want to shuffle, or you want to go ahead and just step out of the show and go to your next podcast or something else you want to do. But podcasting, what needs to happen is the advertising approach. The style of advertising needs to change in general, because you're getting the same problem, Omri, in streaming video. Unless you have certain places that maybe Disney Plus might offer ad insertion, or Peacock does. But there's those free models for some of those. What you need to fight with is the fact that there are premium shows that are just getting a subscription model and a paywall up in front, and they're not worrying about any advertising at all, unless they want to promote something of their own. That's how they want to feel about it. So what else do you do? That's the question. But it gave me something to talk about for the next 20 minutes. I appreciate that, though. That was a good thing. All right, let's go into music real quick. A few things I want to bring up about that here. NFTs. This is a story that came up from Forbes. This was an interesting thing, because music right now is trying to find a way to monetize. When it comes to finding, when you're not getting the money off of physical units. Well, this is the chance to do that again, because the music industry will have physical units of something of an artist to put out there. And then you have a chance to actually monetize that. So you get back to physical units. That's what the real deal with non-fungible tokens. We've talked about it here on the program as well. So they talk about here in this story from Forbes.com, titled, "Are NFTs a New Napster? This time the music industry isn't taking chances." The writer Michael Del Castillo talks about NFTs being made by Kings of Leon. They were honored at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Southern-inflected rock band. And what got them there was not its music, but its non-fungible token, or NFT, called NFT Yourself. The digital tokens went on sale in March for the Ethereum equivalent of $50 a pop, and include a copy of the band's latest album, a unique piece of artwork, a one-off gold record, and musical outtakes. And then, over the next 2 weeks, it was available. They moved 6,500 copies of NFT Yourself for a total of $2.2 million, including 6 golden tickets that sold at an average price of $100,000. Those extra special NFTs included VIP concerts for lifetime, VIP concert access for lifetime for one show per tour, complete with a chauffeur. And since the 2-week offer originally, the NFTs have generated another $250,000 in aftermarket sales, and the band would collect 10% of that. They're making some money in the new age of cryptocurrency. Now, Kings of Leon's 42-year-old drummer Nathan Followell did say that, quote, "record deals have lost their value in a way. Nowadays, a kid can make a record on GarageBand and put it out on TikTok and put it out as an NFT or put it out in any form. It's almost like they don't need to rely on the record industry as much as they used to, which in turn is making the industry kind of panic." And that's what they're talking about. Now, there's an artist in Wisconsin named Beeple, or real name Mike Winkleman. He got the world's imagination when he sold a collage of 5,000 JPEGs at Christie's for $64.9 million. Musical NFTs are no different, except in addition to any artwork, they come with audio files like the MP4 sold by Kings of Leon. And other acts that have done better with NFTs includes superstar DJ Justin Blau. who sold $20 million worth of NFTs since he started issuing them last fall, teaming up with the surreal artist Mike Paracella, or aka Slime Sunday, selling 33 limited edition NFTs of his latest album, Ultraviolet, which have included animated videos by the artists, with the artist synced with Blau's music. The NFTs, or digital tokens, each unique and like cryptocurrency, are tradable on a blockchain, also provide a direct and permanent link to the superfans who hold on to them. Even though the buyers are just anonymous numbers floating in the blockchain ether, musical acts can use them to market and sell new music, fresh artwork, concert tickets, and merchandise. Done right, NFTs offer the ease and ubiquity of internet distribution, think Napster, but with digital rights protection built in, think iTunes. And there's some that feel like there might be piracy here because the NFTs could be as dangerous as the pirated MP3 files that sent the industry into a death spiral 20 years ago. WMG Warner Music Group's digital chief officer, Oana Ruxandra, explains, quote, "One of the things that has been the downfall of the music industry is that we compete very heavily against each other. And then tech comes out and they eat our lunch, and we're still competing with each other and won't talk." Noting the obvious shift in power dynamics NFTs represent, she added, "Any revolution justifies an assessment and evolution of artists' contracts." NFTs. If you can create a physical unit, and this is even something more, it's not just a box set. It's not just you get a nice album cover. You're getting more embedded into this. If you can sell these kind of things and they can become marketable and they can become like collecting gold coins or collecting stamps, that's what blockchain and Bitcoin are doing right here with these NFTs. Well, not Bitcoin, but crypto and blockchain in the first place. That's what the interesting part is. It is a physical unit you could put a price on. And the Kings of Leon, of all people, are able to get themselves out there to sell albums and can get millions of dollars for it well after their prime years of making money on music. Then why not? Follow also would say that, quote, "I would say within the next 10 years, 70% of albums will be released in NFT form." Quote, "Anytime you're just up the road from Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles, you must be doing something right." Keep all of that in mind. What could happen? With rock, I do want to go and take a little thing that Radio Insight put out. 40 years of rock radio. This is a change from what was out there in terms of progressive radio or freeform radio back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The book FM, written by Richard Neer. I would absolutely go ahead and say, go look for that book and listen to it or read it. It's a great read on radio. Very interesting, fascinating. I listened to the audiobook twice so far, and I really like it. Now, because of the fact of MTV's 40th anniversary, this story from Sean Ross was brought up here, and he talked about it. He mentions at the parallel time of rock radio and rock radio in and out of the pop mainstream was occurring here when he talks about 1981. Journey's Escape album, Then and Now, the sound of pop rock in that era, was 2 weeks old. Your definition of kick-ass may vary, especially talking about an era of polish, a lot of hits. Corporate rock isn't a pejorative for me. It's the rock music of my age group. And in August 1981, 5 years after the first Boston album, it was at its apex. And 81 was the winter and spring of REO Speedwagon and Styx. By August 1st, Foreigner's Urgent gave them a comeback after a less successful attempt to rock harder on Head Games. Journey's Who's Crying Now had rapidly ascended the charts, and the stations that wanted something a little more rocking were playing Stone in Love, Not Yet, Don't Stop Believin'. August 1981, Pat Benatar had been a star for the last 18 months. Her hot streak was just starting to cool with the appropriately titled Fire and Ice. The Moody Blues made a surprise soundtrack sounding like ELO, Stevie Nicks and Tom Petty's Stop Dragging My Heart Around was only a few days old as well. Those big crossover rock hits were also contemporary hit radio's power rotation songs. It was a second tier of album-oriented rock smashes from that spring and summer. You had Rush's Tom Sawyer, The Stroke by Billy Squier, Burning for You by Blue Oyster Cult, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap by AC/DC. That were really a rock station half of contemporary hit radio top 40, not a really adult contemporary station half. In the UK at that time, the pop chart on August 1st had a broad spectrum, including the specials, punk, or more like a ska punk kind of a breakbeat kind of a group. Spandau Ballet, Depeche Mode, New Wave, Human League, Duran Duran. In the US, Squeeze's Tempted was rock's new nod to New Wave. And down the tracks, you would find Ice House by Ice House becoming an early MTV signature video. R&B was also very incredible at this point. You had Zapp, The Gap Band, Kashif, Solar, and Prince at this point. Urban Contemporary was bringing R&B to FM in a big way for the first time in the early 80s, but only a few of its flagships, particularly Kiss 108 in Boston, were part of the pop chart. From a radio programming standpoint, there was considerable overlap between the active rock stations and having top 40 elements and the hit radio stations that were actually album-oriented rock. So you had a lot of stations that were just acting like rock. It was rock radio, but done as top 40. You didn't have the pop music in it, but they were programmed as such. And that's what it was in the 80s. And then things started changing in the 90s, where alternative became the new name for active rock. And you still had titles from Heritage Acts, Van Halen, 38 Special, Allman Brothers, Bonnie Raitt's Something to Talk About was a rock radio hit. Then the tail end of hair metal was Scorpions' Winds of Change, Extreme's More Than Words, Guns N' Roses' You Could Be Mine. And then alternative titles at this point early on were Jesus Jones's Right Here, Right Now, and REM's Shiny Happy People. Top 40 was in a period of transition in the 90s, the last 5 years, dominated by hair bands, the beginning of crossover hip-hop, alternative crossovers. But then we had the change to grunge. It Smells Like Teen Spirit coming out. Rock radio got a renaissance. Over the course of 2 to 3 years, the vitality and influence of the early 80s. The first few years, without the ratification of top 40, was barely hanging on some markets and gone on others. Alternative stations had to have influence without pop, helped the scene to reinforce their importance, because they were not songs that were crossing over. When we talk about rock, it's the counterculture. With that said, rock music at the time stayed counterculture, but was able to withstand and sustain as a standalone popular music that would be crossed over into the current mainstream culture at that time. But then things changed in the 2000s. Early 2000s, both the teen punk descended from Blink-182 and emo and harder rock would have an impact again. Linkin Park's current single at the time was Crawling. And in the end, out was following up after that, one of their top 40 signature songs in this new, more extreme era. Active and alternative formats were closer than ever. Active radio at the time of August 1st, 2001, Tool's Schism, Stain's It's Been a While, and Linkin Park's Crawling. Alternative, it was Stained, Blink-182's The Rock Show, and Tool. Even without MTV, because MTV was no longer playing music by this time, for the most part, rock radio had a definite musical footprint, but there was grumbling because it wasn't the music. Alternative program directors came to the format to play. 2011, active and alternative radio, rock radio, have been pulling away from each other since the release of Seven Nation Army 8 years earlier, and being increasingly driven by indie pop. So the active rock you would have heard in 2011 would have been Avenged Sevenfold, Seether, and Theory of a Dead Man. Alternative would have Foster the People, Mumford & Sons, and AWOL Nation. And then you look at today, 2021. August 1st, 2021. They look and say that alternative has quickly been much the quirky pop format that was taking shape in 2011. It has some presence in the top 40. You have artists like Billie Eilish, AJR, Machine Gun Kelly, All Time Low, and Glass Animals. The crossovers are hard fought, and there are always a few more songs at any given time that don't go quite as well. And then some alternative stations are looking at the pop stations to get the crossover going on, but the reverse crossover trend has slowed. And active rock is much more older. So you have Heritage Rock hits in 1991. Greta Van Fleet went from sounding like Led Zeppelin to sound like Rush. Morax started to sound like Greta Van Fleet. Volbeat currently sounds like Teen Punk. And active isn't sending many records to alternative. Like, there's just not much there. And then I talked about a few weeks ago where rock is coming in from pop. So there were a lot of rock records that were making mainstream top 40. And that was Olivia Rodrigo's Good For You, Måneskin's Beggin', and then also the other song, I Want to Be Your Slave, at the same time. They talk about the irony of MTV and launches a not R&B format, eventually having a role in the broadening of active rock and hit radio. So now consider the next guitar record at either top 40 or alternative won't have been driven by rock radio or MTV, but Eurovision, which is all pop oriented. At the moment anyway, hit radio is seemingly moving towards a more balanced place where room for rock could be happening again. Whether rock radio reopens its pipeline to pop depends on its own available product, but also perhaps on whether alternative or active can find a place where they can work in tandem on a few songs while maintaining separate identities for overall. Well, rock is starting to get its place. We're starting to see that happening now more and more, where we're getting punk records. I mean, listen, pop punk, or like really pop punk, or almost like indie pop kind of feel. Like Billie Eilish put a great song out, Happier Than Ever, has that rock feel, but really just the indie pop rock kind of a deal to it that just definitely has a standout. We'll go to alternative. We'll go to pop radio and cross over. And that's what's going on. Staying with radio, I want to talk about the fact that the advertising that Omri, over in Ad Age, actually talking about what we talked about a few minutes ago, I mentioned the story about a one-stop streaming shop for broadcast radio. So there have been recent deals that are opening for more collaboration between broadcasters to bring their stations to as many platforms as possible. After keeping their stations exclusive to their own iHeartRadio app for years, iHeart has now once again worked with TuneIn to bring their stations to that platform in exchange for TuneIn to use iHeart's internal digital advertising products to sell on the TuneIn platform. With Odyssey putting much more emphasis on its digital platform since its rebranding both the company and its radio.com platform under the same name. It's expanding the number of other broadcasters on its platform in recent weeks, where they're getting other companies adding to their app. There are still 4 diverging strategies amongst the commercial broadcasters. iHeartMedia is still the standalone, but its willingness to open its stations to TuneIn and Apple Music at least shows a newfound willingness to work with others. As it's still growing its platform, Odyssey is looking inwards but ramping up with other groups to accumulate a critical mass. The rest have had to determine which ship to jump aboard. So they show all the different companies and where they are in the mix of if they're on iHeartRadio, Odyssey, or TuneIn, and where they should be. So overall, they're saying there's a strong positive momentum, but we still have a long ways to go to put all FCC licensed broadcasters on equal footing like the radio player standard using other companies on the principle of share technology, compete on content. And none of the platforms have made it easier for smaller broadcasters to add their stations. So TuneIn actually placed a new freeze on new station submissions several years ago, but if you know their internal code for your allocation, it can be done. Neither iHeart or Odyssey have publicly available information for a licensed station to be potentially added the way they do for podcasts. Anyway, long story short. So, advertising, they're going to find a way to get, and they need to find new places to go and put their advertising out there to get it heard, even if people don't want to hear it in the first place. Now, this is a story I meant to talk about last week about journalism. Thought it would be a good time to bring it up here and bring it up. TheHill.com talks about protecting the future of journalism with a Journalist Protection Act, congressional act being put together and proposed. According to the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, attacks against journalists increased 1,000% in 2020 compared with the previous year. Journalists are being arrested, verbally assaulted, and physically attacked at rates like we've never seen in recent history. The most routine stories have become dangerous, with journalists reporting equipment damage and getting shot at and facing other forms of attack while on the job. Well, when you go through a very volatile political season and you are supporting fear-mongering of the pandemic, whether it's right or wrong, it still comes down to the fact that we're getting to this point and we're saying to ourselves, you're going to put out programming on a regular basis, whether it's radio or news on television. You're not even talking about the things that are going on in the neighborhood when it comes to accidents or murders or crimes being committed, which are impacting the neighborhoods. No, we're talking about COVID all day, every day. There's a very good argument you can make as to we really need to consume ourselves with so much going on about what's being done with COVID. I mean, do we need to worry about the coverage that's going on like this? And really, the journalists, I mean, I got something that was really interesting the other day where I was watching a TikTok on, 4 reasons to not watch the media. So I want to pull a story real quick. There was a TikTok that somebody put up on Rolf Dobelli. And he mentioned that quitting the news started off as an experiment until he realized it improved his life, encouraging people to go deep instead of broad when it comes to keeping up with current events. And he offers the top reasons why he stopped tuning in and the way he did it. So he's a Swiss author and self-help guru. And this is what's important right now as to why there is a backlash on journalists, whether good or bad. But some of those journalists, I must admit, they're doing the bidding of their publishers, of their editors, of the people that pay their checks. I think some of them probably are doing this when they don't want to do it. They probably would prefer to be doing something else. And that's what's going on. So he mentioned that he has a solution to our endless appetite for social media. A decade ago, he switched off completely and documents his journey in a fascinating new book, Stop Reading the News, which I got to go and look for and read. He says, number one, don't switch off, but be more conscious about what you're consuming. Suggesting that people do right now, there's some techniques he relies on. I would really suggest, quote, anybody struggling with their feelings at this time, think seriously about not just how much news they consume, but what it is. So know your sources, dip into it, and limit your news consumption to 15 minutes each day. Literally set a timer. That is more than enough to get a sense of what is happening in these extraordinary times. Then he says why long reads in newspapers can help. He's adamant about reading magazines and books that are not afraid and have the resources to present the world in all its complexity. Right. If you have the room to not put the story out in snippets or in small sound bites. I completely agree with that. He also says long reads in newspapers because the author believes constantly absorbing social media 24/7 gives an illusion of knowledge rather than understanding. To use news as a guide to point him towards other resources so he can deeply understand, say, the pandemic and work out my personal response to it. Then he talks about by being more conscious, you can gain back 90 minutes in a day. So yeah, taking the time to get from that. And also it's going to help for your mental health. Let's just say that. Instead of being scared, instead of being nervous, instead of getting frightened or getting anxious or getting angry, we get rid of that. So I need to go look for that book, and I might get that. Hopefully it's a Audible book. If it's Stop Reading the News, I'm going to go find out if it is, because that is a book I want to go and look up and pick up myself and check out. I'm looking forward to that. Stop Reading the News. Rolf Dobelli. I'm going to go look that up, and I'll go find out if it's how good it is. But I listened to the Tech Talk. It was amazing. Very quick if you want to look it up and check it out for yourselves. Now, there are other stories I want to bring up, but I'm going to hold off all this movie stuff I have for next week. So I'll come up and table why Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow legal battle means for the future of Hollywood. The birth of the subscription streaming platform Disney Plus is a good marker for the transition that spurred a wholesale realignment of film and TV operations. And for Daniel Craig and Dwayne Johansson, the biggest movie star salaries. Actually, I'll bring that story up right now. How much are the celebrities making? We should know that. It'd be nice to get an idea what that is. So let's go and bring that up real quick from Variety.com. Right now, Daniel Craig is one of the highest paid actors, $100 million plus. Dwayne Johansson comes in second, $50 million. Will Smith, Denzel Washington at $40 million. Leo DiCaprio at $30 million. Mark Wahlberg, $30 million. Jennifer Lawrence, Julia Roberts, Sandra Bullock, $20 to $25 million. Yeah, we're going to hear the crap. Why are we seeing so many, actors that are not people of color? Why aren't there many women getting equal pay? Things like that. We're going to hear that. I know. But we'll, leave it there and see what else people are going to say about it. There's a lot there. I put the link out there. I'll go and leave that for all of you. But like I said, the movie issue with streaming and the money that's being made for people that are in their movies that won't make the money or the revenue that comes from having the movie in theaters. We'll figure out all that. Anyway, I'm going to go watch Protege this weekend, I believe. And then I meant to go and watch Free Guy, but I don't know if I'll get to catch it this week or not. I'll find out if I do. But anyway, we're going to leave it there. And thank you for listening in, subscribing to the show as you always do, and do tell a friend of a friend so we can get this show out to more people and they can check it out for themselves. Until next week, come back for another Broadcasters Podcast, and remember, content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.